Greetings, everyone. I am profoundly honored to have received the James Haecker Award from ARCC. I had been very much looking forward to attending the conference and hearing about many areas of research less familiar to me, meeting colleagues I have not had occasion to meet before, and of course catching up with longtime friends and colleagues. So I am very sad that in the end I have not been able to make the trip to the conference, especially so because I found the conference theme about applied research as a bridge between theory and practice is a perspective that very much underlies some of the organizing concepts of my co-authored book, Architectural Research Methods, as well as many aspects of my own research and my work with doctoral students. It also frames the thinking behind a book that my colleague, Professor Marta Berkovic-Dodeg, from the Union University Nikola Tesla, Serbia, and postdoctoral fellow at Technical University Berlin, and I have recently submitted to the publisher. The book is titled The Routledge Companion for Games in Architecture and Urban Planning, Tools for Design, Teaching, and Research. After a brief overview of the book concept, I would like to briefly highlight two of the book chapters and tie them into the conference theme as a way that games may constitute one sort of bridge between theory and practice. Games have been used at least since the late 17th century as a means for exploring cities, faraway lands, exotic countries, and fantasy worlds. In other words, as a way of traveling through space and time. But in recent history of architecture and urban planning, I'd like to highlight briefly the contributions of two pioneers in the use of games. The first, Richard Duke, now Professor Emeritus of the University of Michigan, brought games into the urban planning arena and university context in the late 1960s and 1970s. His work is often considered to be the starting point for recent developments in the design methodology of simulation and gaming. The second notable pioneer in the use of games is Henry Sanoff, now Professor Emeritus from North Carolina State University. From the 1970s onwards, Sanoff developed, employed, and evaluated games, thereby establishing them as effective tools for participatory design. Sanoff's book, Design Games, from 1979, presented an array of environmental games, discussed their rules, concepts, and methods for recording games, thereby providing a much-needed guide to architects, students, and teachers on how to use these games to discuss their preferences and learn. Some of you likely know Professor Sanoff also as a founder of the Environmental Design Research Association. Most architects, planners, and other allied professionals currently working at differing scales of environmental design employ games as devices within one or more of the following contexts. The first, co-design, with the goal of planning and/or designing in collaborative way with users and community groups that have a vested interest in the design outcome. And second, educational and pedagogical purposes with the goal of enhancing the depth and quality of learning for students, participants, usually by employing a hands-on, active, and sustained engagement. And third, research, with the goal of elucidating the underlying cognitive and/or emotional experience of the eventual impact of the participants' game experiences. With this tripartite set of game contexts in mind, we've organized the book's chapter sections according to the three distinctive strains of the field, while signaling also overlapping areas by presenting the games that serve dual or multiple purposes, thus games as tools for co-design and education as an example. Thus, there are 17 chapters grouped into 6 parts. Each part consists of chapters sorted according to the main purpose of the games they analyze. The first chapter I'm going to discuss is the sorting task, its versatility and adaptability in research, teaching, and practice. This is a chapter that I wrote in collaboration with two former doctoral students, Matthew Neerman, Associate Professor of Architecture at California Baptist University, and Brian Shermer, Associate Professor of Architecture at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and a principal at Workshop Architects. This chapter describes the history and evolution of the multiple sorting task as an adaptable and effective device for eliciting participants' understandings of both the qualitative nature of and the structure of their life experiences, including environments of all scales. The development of the sorting task, initially as a research tool, emerged over several decades through a long tradition of clinical and cognitive psychology. By the 1980s, researchers in environmental psychology had refined and adapted the sorting task for use in addressing a variety of research contexts, while also testing its versatility for engaging responses, multi-layered responses to environments of all scales. Once the sorting task's inherent versatility was established, it was adapted as a game-like device for engaged learning experiences in environmental design teaching and for participatory purposes with client and civic groups in the practices of architecture, urban design, and planning. A total of 6 exemplar engagements of the multiple sorting task within the context of research, teaching, and practice are described in detail, and the implications of their outcomes fully examined. Specific exemplars of the use of the sorting task research protocol include Groat's initial engagement of it in a study of architects' and non-architects' responses to modern and postmodern styled buildings, and a recent research study in which the sorting task protocol was substantially expanded in interviews with church members and unchurched community members concerning their interpretations of appealing and welcoming attributes of church building designs. Next, we discuss 2 uses of the sorting task in educational settings, one in which architecture students are asked to reflect on their personal image banks of past place experiences, and another that simulates architecture students' experiences of how they might design for a client respondent whose responses to sorting home design exteriors are substantially different than their own. Finally, we examine the use of the sorting task in 2 co-design settings. The first is an extension of the church exterior study, in which the extent to which church members' spiritual practices might affect their design priorities in program space allocation in a new church building. And the final exemplar examines how the sorting task was used in a university context to identify the values and priorities of students and other university community members for the purpose of programming for renovations to student unions and centers on campus. The second chapter is by my co-editor Marta Berkovic-Dodeg from Serbia and Prue Childs, Professor of Architectural Design Research at Newcastle University. It elaborates on the game called Spectre, the Sustainability Inspector. The game was developed as a participatory post-occupancy research tool to investigate primary and secondary what is important to primary and secondary school pupils with a specific focus on the sustainability aspects of schools. Spectre has been tested internationally in 1 secondary school in England, 1 primary school in Serbia, and 1 primary school in Spain. Spectre not only provides an effective tool for the drawing out of participants' knowledge, views, and understandings, but it can also enhance both the student assistants and the pupils' knowledge about sustainable environments. The game thus seems to show potential for further development as both a research and a teaching learning tool within primary and secondary schools and within the architectural design studio. The authors conclude that games in general deserve serious attention as a useful alternative to traditional teaching and research tools, and secondly, that architects and designers can play an important role in the development of games such as Spectre for the evaluation of architectural design and its potential contribution to global sustainability. As the reader will discover in the pages of this book, it is not just universities that have created educational games, not just architecture and urban planning studios that have created co-design games, and not just research bodies within or outside universities that have created games as research tools. Almost all the games, as the authors themselves observe, can be adapted and modified to be used for other purposes, be it teaching, research, or co-design. Likewise, I would like to suggest that these multifaceted and intricate games can serve as exemplary bridges between theory and practice. Thank you once again for honoring me with the James Haecker Award.